In this video, we're going to start out with all the tools required to take that old family heirloom, repair it, and refinish it to a real thing of beauty. We're starting out with Worksite, obviously. You need a place to do this. A good sturdy workbench, in this case an adjustable one, which is a real help. You'll need a nice strong source of light that can be adjusted, and we're going to find out why later, why that's so important. Some of the other tools and materials you're going to need for serious repairs, we're going to need some carpenter's wood glue, Elmer's carpenter's wood glue.
That's for major repairs, I presume?
Major repairs of the broken stocks. Simply a knife, a curved blade knife. This is for old finish removal, and you're going to find out why that works best in the video. Of course, sandpaper. We're going to use lots of sandpaper.
What kind of sandpaper are they going to have to buy?
Mostly 400 grit. You maybe want a few that are 200 to 300 grit, just a sheet or two for some of the rough work.
That's a mighty fine grit.
And you might want to put in stock a couple of 800 grit sheets. This is for, you're going to be sharpening these chisels. When we get into the chisel section, you're going to find out this is very important. Another real important basic is a magnifier. You want to be able to see. We're doing detail work here when we get into the carving and checkering in particular, but even in the repair. The closer and the more detailed you can see the work, the finer work you do. Something like this is ideal. This is a 4.5 power magnification. You clip it to your eyeglasses if you wear them.
And what would this be called if you're shopping for this?
Magnifier, I guess.
Okay.
I've seen many different types on the market. This one happens to just be perfect. And one thing to look for when you do that is you want one that you can look through, but if you have to reach further away on the bench for something, you just simply look underneath the glasses, and it's not going to make you all dizzy from being out of focus. The other thing you're going to be needing is a veining tool. And what the veining tool is a V-shaped chisel. A very fine V-shaped chisel, very sharp.
Okay.
You find this is one of the most used tools, actually. Even though you're just checkering, that's one of the primary ones. Again, we go back to, we're using this knife again when we start applying the checkering to lay out the master lines. And then, of course, you have the basic checkering tools themselves. And the main one you're going to need is a spacing tool. Okay. This one is 20 lines per inch. And the spacing there, you'll see there's one row of file teeth and the other one is blunt. Once you have one line carved in, the blunt one goes into that groove, and it is an automatic spacer to cut the next line with the tooth edge. So you'll need a left and a right hand one of the same spacing.
What are these called again?
The spacing tools.
Okay, spacing.
Spacing checkering tools. There's a right and left hand. They're both 20 lines per inch, or 1/20th of an inch apart. Then you'll need a single line cutter. Same basic tool, but it simply cuts one single line. Now all these cutters come in coarse and fine teeth. We want to stay with the fine teeth all the time. The coarse are just too coarse. This is a coarse one, and this is a fine one. This coarse one, I really found out I don't need it. Then you need a planer or jointer, sometimes they're referred to. This is a true planer or jointer, and you say the same thing. It's a V-shaped file with fine teeth on it, but it's a long piece. This is basically the same thing. It's a little sharper. It's a 60-degree angle rather than 40, and it's got a curved belly on it, so it doesn't take such a big bite at once. It's a little easier cutting through. And these are a real godsend to keep the line straight. If you think a line tends to want to go a little bit off course, and we'll go into that, the hows and whys and how to correct that. Then you'll need short line spacers. Here's a very short line spacer. These are indispensable for either a very short line or a very tight curve. They can follow around it. And another short line. This is a carbide tipped one. which has a very long lifespan.
So if they're shopping for these checkering tools, carbide tip is a better way to go?
It's going to cost more than 10 times as much, but it'll last 50 times as long.
Okay, so if you're doing
If they're
several
available.
stocks.
If they're available.
So if you're going through one stock, how many of these can you go through, the bits?
Well, one set of the standard bits should last you 5-6 stocks anyway, maybe
Okay.
even 10.
So if you're going to do a massive amount of stocks, you need the carbide bit.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're just doing one stock, just a normal
Well,
bit
even
should
if
be
you do
fine.
20 or 30, you could buy 3 or 4 replacement bits for these. They're fairly inexpensive. You can see they're pinned in.
Okay.
So they are replaceable. And you could buy 3 or 4 of them and be still far under the cost of a carbide. And we have another, this is another short single cutter, but you see the shank on it is much more drop to it. And this is very nice where you're going onto multifaceted curved surfaces, because as you're carving the checker, you're going to always want to keep the tool at a 90-degree surface to the work surface. Other tools you're going to need are a Ponce Wheel. And the Ponce Wheel is used for laying out your patterns or any lines, especially through a paper, through a pattern. And what it does, you roll it along where you want your line to be.
Like a pizza cutter.
Like a little pizza cutter with teeth on it. And it'll leave a series of dots, which then you can follow with a veining chisel or your single line cutters. Here's the veining chisel again. Little V chisel, that's usually what you follow it with it. Another tool you're going to need, and towards the finishing side of it, is this is a brilliant little gadget. You buy, there's about a set of 4 of them. You get a green one and a blue one and a black one, and there's sanding strips on it. It's spring loaded, and when the strip gets old, you take it off and you buy a little packet of replacement belts for it. Put the belt on, and the spring tension keeps it taut. You can get into really tight little spaces in the woodwork to sand out.
So this for checkering primarily? Or you can use it for other things?
Just to clean up anything you need, real fine detail sanding.
Okay. So around them funny corners where the bolt handle turns down and
Right.
Trigger guard area, whatever.
Another thing you're going to do when repairing dents in stocks is you sweat them out with a cloth and a heating iron. And that can be anything from your wife's clothes iron to a soldering iron. Or in this case, this is like a soldering iron, but it only goes up to 300 degrees, and it's for melting shellac sticks, which we'll go into that too. That is another go-to for minor repairs. Little scratches or dents that you cannot sand out or otherwise get out, we can oftentimes cover them over with a melting shellac stick. Then once you're doing the finishing, there's several other options that you go to, and one of them is a detail called stippling. This goes hand in hand with more of the carving. If you carve a figure of an animal or leaves, the space between it, the background, can either be left carved or stippled is one of the most popular ones. Stippling is simply a series of indented dots into the wood, and they could be concave or convex or square. So you have a selection, you can make those very easily out of anything.
And you can shape the nail to whatever size stipple you want.
That's right, any
Okay.
size, any shape. And then with the carving, of course, we're going to get into carving chisels and gouges. Of course, a chisel refers to a flat chisel. If a chisel has any curve to it at all, that's called a gouge. And you'll be using mostly gouges. The flat chisels don't have much use. Even when you're trying to do a flat surface, we're going to end up using a slightly curved gouge to carve in our flowers and animals and borders.
Now, is this something you would buy in a kit? A checkering kit, would it come with all these different checkering tools, or do you have to buy them individually?
This brand of checkering tools are Dembart. There are several good brands out there. I like Dembart. And they do make a starter kit, which has a few of the basic things, including a veining tool, which is indispensable, as I say.
So is a starter kit going to have everything you need to get one stock done?
It'll have everything you need to get started. If you decide to do anything more than that, you might start looking at the catalog and deciding that this would be very handy. One thing I don't believe it has is a jointer planer. This is a jointer planer. I don't know why they call it that. Basically, it's used to straighten out lines as you carve in, or with the file or checkering tool, a line in the stock. Once in a while, of course, you're doing this freehand, and you have a guide that you're trying to use. But the stock grain will pull you off course once in a while, and sometimes make the line a little wavy, or a slight curve to it. And if it's where you don't want it, stop right there. You put this into the groove back in a straight part, and fairly firm pressure, just go along, and it magically just straightens that line.
So
right
it's got
out.
a longer wheelbase.
It's got a longer wheelbase, and it
Okay.
just kind of forces its way to make it straight.
So if you got a line trying to wiggle out of whack, you can
That's
just
right.
straighten her out with that one.
Straightens right out.
Gotcha.
So apart from all these, you're going to find, especially with the checkering and carving, there's all kinds of extra tools that you're going to find very helpful. One of them here, I picked up a real cheap set of files, and a couple of them I use a lot is it's not files, it's the chisels, but it's a little spade cut flat chisel, and we'll get into why it's used for. I use it mostly for scraping in little detailed areas of wood for finishing. Also, very helpful is a whole set of needle files, all shapes and sizes and contours. We got this is half round, it's dished, and you'll find that they're great to get in little tough places. Little rat tail files. And this is, I had one sock in particular, had a real tight corner, and there was no way I could get in with the checkering tool or even in my veining tool. Finally, I had to use a bent needle nose plier to finish the line out because it was way in the backside of a pistol grip that you couldn't get there with anything else.
Improvise.
Right. Another tool you're going to need a lot, it's an old toothbrush. As you get start making sawdust with this checkering, it's a very fine sawdust, but periodically you're going to want to brush it out so you can really see your work good. It also comes in real handy for later applying your oil finish. Another indispensable one is these grease pencils. You can buy a fairly inexpensive. They come in white or yellow. You're going to find out that if the wood is really finished smoothly, it doesn't want to draw on there very well. And if that's the case, you simply wet it. Just touch it to your tongue or slightly damp, and it writes real good. The reason is if you use a pencil or anything else, and you're drawing a line where you think you're going to cut, if you decide you're not going to cut there, a regular pencil is going to leave a dent in the finish. This does not. It very easily lays on a soft line. And then for the finishing products, on some occasions you may need to touch up your stain, and as most stocks are going to be done with black walnut, Birchwood casing makes a great water-based walnut stain, wood stain. And you could dilute it a little bit if you think the shade is a little lighter, or use it full strength.
Is this going to work better than the stain you buy at the hardware store?
Right, and it's very fast drying. Within an hour or two you can just continue on. And then of course the, wow, a little drag in there. Boiled linseed oil. This is the finish on the stock. Now it's time proven, it's been around for over a couple hundred years, has been the go-to. Made from flax, it's a natural product, boiled linseed oil. Same stuff your old linoleum floors were made from, and you know how tough the finish was on those. You can find them 100 years old, they're not even scuffed. It's, to my mind, the only finish worth putting on a stock. Any of the other ones, they'll frost over, or if they get a slight scratch, or they have show little like fracture lines out from it, and you cannot spot repair these other finishes. Boiled linseed oil, no problem. You can sand out a bad scratch even, and just apply it to the scratch area to refinish one spot, and put a few coats on. It'll completely blend with the original finish.
So would that be vastly superior to just using a clear coat and spraying it on there?
Absolutely. Clear coats are a true no-no. The only other possible exception you can use, it would be true oil. Birchwood Casing makes. Many gunsmiths use this almost exclusively. The problem with it is that it's not true. It's basically linseed oil, but with a secret drying agent.
Okay.
Which I haven't heard what it is, but It's probably petroleum based, because if you get it on your hands, you need almost kerosene to take it off. They get so sticky. This washes off soap and water.
And that dries a little faster?
It'll dry overnight.
Okay.
That's the only downside to the original and time-proven boiled linseed oil, is it has a very long drying time.
Is that relatively inexpensive?
It's very inexpensive. And get the smallest can you can. This is way too big. I bought this 5 years ago. I do a lot of gun stocks. It's still 3/4 full.
Okay.
It takes very little oil to do a stock.
So about this much oil would be plenty.
Like I said, the true oil can be used. And I have done it a few times. That's why I have it here. For some rush jobs, they really wanted it back. But it dries so fast that as you're applying it, it starts to get tacky, and it doesn't give a smooth finish. Unless you find the secret of thinning it half and half with lighter fluid. Just put it in a little bottle cap, and just a few drops. See, a lot of times is all that's required. And but 50-50 with Ronson lighter fluid.
Now, did you have some kind of shellac stick?
Melted shellac sticks for stock repair. Yes, that's another. Once, like say, you found some scratches or dents that just don't want to come out. They're too deep, and you don't want to take off that much wood. This is a great little thing. They come in a variety of colors, from very dark brown to actually black, white, and several shades of brown.
So if you need to fill in some empty spots, this is what you use. You match it to the wood?
Yeah, right. And you can almost always find one that matches it very well. And they're called melted shellac sticks because they're hard and brittle like a little lollipop. But you touch it to this, once this is a little shellac stick iron, and you plug it in, and it heats up in a minute and 300 degrees. You simply touch it to it, it melts on contact, and you butter it right across the scratch or dent. The other tube used for very small repairs, though. In a larger area, it is brittle and it would tend to crack and shatter.
Any other major tools?
That's what kind of really comes to mind right now. Of course, as in anything else, there's you'll discover on your own a whole assortment of other tools that come in very handy. Some are totally unrelated. I have some clay modeling tools that I had laid around anyway, and I found a few of them. These in particular work great for scraping the surface of the background on a carving in really tight little spaces. And of course, I have a set of diamond files with diamond dust. Again, they're like little needle nose files, but with diamond dust.
Are there any clamping tools you recommend that come to mind, or do you?
This is a very good question. Most of your gunstock workers, checkers, they swear by you can't do the work without a checkering cradle, which is nothing more than a clamp that grabs a stock from end to end firmly, and then it goes into a flexible bench vise, basically, that you can turn and lock into position this way or any position you want to. And they swear by it because it holds the work firmly in place, so you can use both hands on your tool. I had one, I tried it. For the type of work I do a lot of wraparound checkering and carving, and it would take me 10 times as long because you constantly would be stopping and readjusting the cradle. I hold the work in my hand as I carve and checker. The butt a lot of times on the lap, leaning against the table with a firm hold, and I got a good firm grip, but I can rotate the work as I need to.
The hands are a lot better
without unclamping and reclamping and trying to adjust.
Okay. So a cradle is not absolutely necessary.
Not in my book, but most gunsmiths will tell you it is. Okay. And I can see where they come from because most gun stocks you'll find, even from the factories, they're simply checkered on the side panels of the grip and the side panels of the forearm. Now, if you clamp it down and that's all you do is basically work several flat surfaces, yeah, that would work. But if you want to do some quality checkering, and by that I mean something that shows a little artistic ability, like the ability to go all around the top of a pistol grip and all under the forearm, much less carving all over. The stock is going to be constantly on the move as you're carving and checkering.